Hello, everyone, and welcome to Undercurrent News' series of one-on-one interviews with interesting people in the seafood industry. I'm Matt Craze, the founder of Spheric Research and a contributor of global research reports on important seafood industry topics. Today, I'm going to interview Sylvia Wulf, who has joined AquaBounty as its CEO. Sylvia has a distinguished career in the food industry, holding senior roles at Tyson and US Foods. Described in her words as a 30-year-old startup, AquaBounty has captured the imagination of the seafood industry with its AquaBounty salmon, which using biotechnology can be raised in a faster time than conventional salmon and potentially suffer less disease issues. AquaBounty, besides its work in genetics, is also a pioneer in the use of recirculating aquaculture systems to grow salmon, which is obviously a really hot topic right now in the salmon industry. So firstly, welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really pleased to be able to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm delighted to have you on this as an interview and to be interviewed in this. Really, just to get things going, I noticed that in the last couple of months, under your leadership, the company has really made some important progress. You've raised a considerable amount of capital, and also there's been progress on perhaps choosing the location for your future plant. And you're also harvesting salmon from your first proof of concept plant. So could you give us a little bit, perhaps just tell us a little bit about your first few months as CEO?
Yes, it's been a very exciting time for AquaBounty. You know, we're a very small company, and as you described us, and I've described us in the past, a 30-year-old startup, so highly entrepreneurial, but not well-resourced or staffed the way that larger companies might be. Yes, this is an exciting time. Number one, we've started sampling AquaBounty salmon for potential customers that have reached out with a great deal of interest in purchasing our salmon. And so that sampling program and that harvesting program has been initiated in Indiana. We announced a donation program because we had been raising conventional salmon and need to get those out of the facility. I think everyone would say 2020 was a bit of a struggle for the world at large, and it certainly was for us as a small company bringing a product to market. So we're really looking forward to 2021. And then on the growth side, we're very excited because we've been through a rigorous site selection process. As I've said to investors and others, there is no more important decision that we'll be making in terms of the future of the company than picking the site for the large-scale farm, what we refer to as Farm 3. And so we looked at 230 sites. We narrowed it down to 25. We went to 5 to do rigorous on-site evaluation, even in the middle of COVID. And so we believe that we have identified the site for the future farm, and we're in the process of due diligence. So not ready to quite make an announcement on that farm because we really do need to get it right. But I would also say the exciting thing is the design of that facility. With our 25 years of experience, we believe that we will be able to design and build a true state-of-the-art facility that'll incorporate all of our learnings over the last 25 years on how to grow salmon in this type of an environment. And we're really pleased to partner with the Novasea because they are very collaborative in terms of thinking through the design of that farm. And so lots of things going on, Matt.
Right, that's great. And I think you said that you targeted the Midwest for this Farm 3. So this would essentially be the first RAS type facility in that part of the world. I think there's maybe one or two other projects that are looking at that region. But what's for you? What is the value proposition of West?
I think that a number of other companies are looking at the coast. We don't really. Well, number one, we farm in fresh water from start to finish, and so it doesn't require us to be near salt water. Number two, we think that the Midwest is an ideal location because, as I've said previously, I think that aquaculture with this type of farming methodology is the next wave of agriculture. And being able to locate in the Midwest, we're able to utilize all of our waste streams. We're able to access 80% of the population in the US within 24 hours. So, making sure that our drive time is minimized. And just the agricultural mentality of the Midwest is highly receptive to the kind of farming and the kind of business that we operate.
Right. And I recall from your interview with the Wall Street Journal recently at a conference that you mentioned that the way that vertical farming systems and perhaps RAS farming systems could kind of be symbiotic, and we might see more of that in the future. It was a really interesting made.
We've been in preliminary, very early conversations with those in the produce industry. I think everyone's looking at vertical farming. It's just like RAS, right? There's a number that have been number that are on the drawing board, several that are being built, but can they actually prove out from a financial perspective? We believe that they will, and we believe that as we think about our site, we want to make sure that we have enough capability to potentially have a partner locate on that site to do vertical farming, because clearly our waste streams, whether it's CO2 or the solid waste, are the inputs to a produce or a vertical farming operation. And so again, we think that is an opportunity for both produce and for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It sounds a little bit like the Superior Fresh project up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, they've done a great job of that.
And how does when an overseas comes in? I mean, one of the big things we always hear about RAS farming is the lack of expertise across the industry to operate systems. And I guess there must be an awful lot of in-house knowledge at AquaBounty about how to operate RAS systems. So how do the Innovaseed guys come in? Do they kind of optimize the way that you're thinking and optimize your existing processes, or kind of blow it up and start again?
No, we actually, as I said, Innovaseed is very collaborative, and they have leading edge on technology. We actually had they were the ones that implemented the RAS systems in our PEI facility up in Canada. And so we worked with them in the past. And what we like about them is that collaborative approach. They definitely have a design that they believe works well. But that's where our practical knowledge comes in, because there are going to be modifications that we'll want to make it more efficient. And they're very receptive to working through those things, as is our civil engineering partner, CRB. And so the three, I call it the three legs of the stool: somebody who's been operating the farms, someone that understands the biofiltration and RAS technology, and then a civil engineer that has built water treatment plants, pharmaceutical plants, which is important for biosecurity. So we really do think we have the three legs of that stool that are going to create a state-of-the-art facility.
Right, that's great. That's great. And something that really, I won't say surprised me, but it's quite remarkable that in Q4 you raised a lot of money from the markets in the pandemic. That must have been what types of conversations did you have with investors, or what was kind of the investor appetite for this equity raise?
There's quite a bit of interest in the whole RAS sector, land-based farming sector. It's part of a broader move to what we call controlled environment ag. Think about AppHarvest. There's others that are making moves in that space. And so, the time is right for what we do from an investor perspective. And there's a lot of interest in how are you going to feed people? How are you going to do it sustainably? And we're able to have those conversations. And, we work with a couple of large investment banks, Lake Street Capital and Oppenheimer. And what they've been able to do is really allow us to tell our story to investors that I call impact investors. Those that really are investing for the future, because this is not something that's going to, we're not going to turn it on tomorrow. And so they have to have a longer term view, but see the value. And clearly our economic proposition is compelling because of our salmon. We create more with less. What's not to like about that, right? And so they positioned us with that type of an investor, and we've been able to really have a dialogue about AquaBounty and the value that we are going to be able to create. And so I think that the timing was perfect for those two capital raises, because we knew that we needed to fund that next farm, and it's not an inexpensive proposition. And so having that, we took advantage of the timing and the markets to be able to raise that capital.
Right. And we've seen it Undercurrent as well, the extraordinary amounts of interest in land-based farming systems. Lots of people from the investment community interested in finding out more information. It's very interesting, your comment you just made about the closed agro environment, that you linked it to a broader trend that I hadn't really thought about that much. Could you speak a little bit more about that? What's happening in the? I know you've worked in the past with Tyson and US Foods, but what does that? What is going on in the broader ag universe with closed environment ag?
So it's controlled environment ag, and so if we think about ag, we can't feed the world, right, without thinking about new methodologies, and we certainly can't feed the world without a potential issue for the environment. And so this space is emerging. It's really agricultural technology, precision farming. You talked about it, vertical farming, eliminating the carbon footprint. Things like, when I say precision farming, like no-till farming, using data to be able to precisely apply herbicides, pesticides, or, farms like ours, where you've got a land-based alternative to ocean pens, which takes the strain off the oceans, and places the production near consumption. Or you think about companies like Beyond Meat, who are looking at how do we create plant-based alternatives to take strain off of animal production. I think all of those options are going to play a role, because there's going to be a lot of people to feed, and we need to do it in a way that really stewards the environment. And so that sector is really emerging as a growth opportunity.
Right. That's great. That's a very, I just hadn't thought about it in that way. It's very, very interesting. I probably got a lot of people thinking, when am I going to talk about genetics and things like that? The way I want to approach this, because obviously that a lot of people, when they hear about AquaBounty, they think about the biotechnology, the genetically engineered salmon. This is a learned audience. A lot of people know the backstory.
Right.
You've come with a different approach. I've followed the AquaBounty story for a long time, and your approach seems to be different in the way that you will approach the market, and being perhaps more open about the message, about the type of salmon that you're going to sell. Perhaps could you tell me a little bit about your strategy versus perhaps what the company's done in the past to attract customers?
Our foundation is built on science and biotechnology. And, it's been a long road to get to the point where we're actually beginning to commercialize that innovation. And the way that I look at it is, consumers are confused about what genetically engineered means. And I don't know that the industry, those that participate in genetically engineered products, because there's plenty of GMOs on the market and consumers are eating them all the time. I don't know that they understand the why and the benefit. And so, there's a lot of conversation going on around trust and transparency. And we're very proud of the innovation that we made and the work that we did and the science that it's based on. And, the one thing I can tell you is, I don't think there's been a more tested food in the history of the FDA, because they wanted to get it right and they wanted to be thorough. And so we're confident that, the food is safe for people to eat, that it is safe for the environment, and it's safe for the fish. And the modification that took place 30 years ago, we have been breeding that fish conventionally for 30 years. And, we take our environmental stewardship very seriously. And so the way we build our facilities, where we locate them, that environmental concern, we want to tell that story to consumers, because what they care about is affordability, accessibility, and taste. And we can deliver on all three of those. And so we want to engage in a different conversation with consumers.
Right, right. That's great. And you mentioned, I think, that you've perhaps adjusted the AquaBounty strategy in terms of how you'll label the product. Perhaps you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think first of all, I'll just state very clearly, we're proud of the fact that our salmon is genetically engineered. We think it solves problems, okay? And they're problems that we all face. We can produce more with less, and we can do it safely, securely, and sustainably. So that's number one. But I think, just telling that story and making sure that the science behind it comes out is the critical discussion that we need to have with consumers.
Yes, and I think as well, and we talked about this in our pre-chat. I came from a major media news organization, and I've been on newsrooms having editorial discussions on AquaBounty, and I can tell you that this conversation took place in 2006, and it was, they were saying "Get Frankenfish" in a headline, and it was quite, it was quite. You have a challenge to win over the media, I feel, and how you seem to be a great communicator. I just wondered how you'll approach that. With this. Again,
I think that our critics and opponents have had an outsized voice versus our tiny little company, right? And so they've dominated the narrative, and quite frankly, a lot of it wasn't based on fact, wasn't based on science, and they scared a lot of people. And I think now's the time for us to step up and tell our story. The U.S. passed the National Bioengineered Disclosure Law. So you're going to have to label anything that's bioengineered, has certain percentage of bioengineered material in it. We had actually said proactively that we would label our salmon. I don't think we need to hide anything from consumers. I think we just need to tell our story, because when we do, consumers are highly receptive to that. They get the fact that, oh, wait a minute, this is a tool that you use to bring benefits and protect the environment. And, our fish are sterile females, so that that big concern that's always thrown out about, oh my gosh, what about it if it escapes, and what's going to happen to the wild population? Well, we take that seriously and want to have a conversation with our critics. We build 6 levels of containment into our facilities to protect our fish and protect the environment. They're sterile females, so we've never had an escape in 20 plus years of raising salmon. But let's just say something does happen. They can't breed, right? And we aren't locating our farm where there's native salmon populations. And so we're very, well aware of the concern that's been stated, and we want to address that, but we want to have a conversation that's based on fact.
Right. That's great. That's very interesting. And I have to say that on my different trips, when I visit Norway and I speak to salmon industry people, it's surprising how often AquaBounty comes up, and it's very clear that industry is watching very closely what you're doing. And I think for them, probably, if I was speaking on their behalf, one of the key questions they probably would have is what type of, how will consumers react to this product? And I think you mentioned in the Wall Street Journal interview that you have done some consumer studies and got a little bit of feedback about what customers would potentially say and think and how they would react. Could you give us a little bit of a sense of what your customer, your feedback has shown you so far?
Sir, we did an extensive, both qualitative and quantitative consumer research. And because we really did want to understand basically two things. How do consumers react to farm salmon? Because there's been stated concerns about, farm salmon has issues when compared to wild caught. And so we wanted to understand how consumers think about farm salmon and what those concerns might be. And then the second was, how do they react to genetically modified or genetically engineered? And so we started with a qualitative discussion, which is really just focus groups. And then we use that qualitative research to test reactions to different messaging, and then ask them, their willingness to purchase or purchase intent. And what we found was, yes, there is a very vocal minority that are concerned. You're never going to convince them that anything genetically engineered is good for them or for the planet. Okay, fine. Not based on fact, but that left 80% of the population that is either neutral to highly likely to purchase our salmon once they understood the why, right, and the benefit to them, right? And so that gave us a 70% purchase intent, which is double what you'd look for in terms of the potential success of a new product. And so that's where I think that, when we're allowed to tell our story. And the other component of the way that we think about the market is, our largest, or in the U.S., what is currently our largest competitor from a land-based perspective, has a bit of a premium pricing strategy, and because of all the benefits. We take a different view, and that is we want to be at commodity prices or better because we want access to a very healthy protein to be provided to a wide range of consumers. And, I shop at Whole Foods. They have a policy that, says no GMOs. Okay, but there's a lot of people that don't shop at Whole Foods that need access to a healthy, nutritious protein. And if you think about the health challenges in this country, that's why we believe that creating broader access and affordability to salmon is really part of our purpose.
Right. And you've had a long, distinguished career in the food service industry with US Foods. What would be your strategy? Will you approach food service first? Obviously, it's had a rough time in the pandemic. Or are you looking more at the retail channels?
We look at both. And quite frankly, we're looking at the direct-to-consumer and direct-to-business channel. One of the outcomes of the pandemic is consumers have changed their buying patterns. We're doing a lot more e-commerce. And so we want to understand how we participate in direct-to-consumer or direct-to-a-business. I think that dynamic, much of it's going to continue. But we're talking to retailers and we're talking to food service. And in particular, what I would consider to be the culinary community within food service. Because, chefs, you get a chef's attention and you show them a quality product, and they want to be on the leading edge and they want to be sustainable. And that's a conversation that we can have. And we do a lot with the Culinary Institute of America, because we think that both, food service, certainly, retail, absolutely, but a broader segment of retail, and then direct to consumer are all opportunities for us to bring our salmon to market.
Right. Have you looked at locking in any early supply contracts with consumers or potential customers, or are you more looking at a sort of spot market situation? We're
having conversations about both, right? A lot of, particularly the food service channel, because it's still recovering, there's that concern about commitments. But we've actually had a number of inquiries around long-term supply agreements, because one of the benefits of land-based farming, the way that we do it, is we control our cost. And so we can commit to those longer-term volume and price agreements because we know what our input costs are going to be. Right. And so there's a lot of interest in that, and domestic source of supply. One of the things one of the challenges we saw with the pandemic was the supply chain interruption. And because we control our environment and we're domestic, you're now we're a net importer of salmon. We're now able to supply, locally, if you will. And so there's a lot of interest around that aspect of our business. And I think, right now I said we're in we've had a ton of inbound interest from potential customers, and we're in that sampling phase of commercialization, because tasting is believing, if you will. They want to see it, they want to taste it, they want to prepare it. And so we've done that with a number of potential customers, and we're doing it with a number of chefs, because again, having that culinary view and advocacy is going to help us bring that product to market.
Right. And you have harvested fish from the first facility since June last year. So what kind of customer feedback have you had so far with fish that you've sold? And which markets have you sold to so far?
So it was conventional salmon. So we started with conventional salmon in Indiana because we had a facility that couldn't be used. And we, again, anytime you bring a new team online and a new farm online, we had some operational challenges, and we had some actually, some challenges with color, and those learnings have all been incorporated into our AquaBounty salmon so that we won't see those again. And then, the fact that our sales were not what we wanted or expected in 2020 when we put a plan together and when we had fish in the water. And that is really because with the collapse of food service, nobody was looking for a new supplier, even of conventional salmon. And so, that was a challenge for us to become a new supplier in the midst of a pandemic. And so what we ended up doing is, yes, we had sales in the Mid-Atlantic. We had some in Chicago, not close to where the farm is. But what we've decided to do with the conventional salmon is to donate it so that we are making sure that we've got plenty of room for our AquaBounty to grow and thrive. And, it's a great product. So why not provide it to people who need food? And so that's what we chose to do with conventional salmon.
Yeah, I see. No, that's great. And actually, it just made me think of, I just held a webinar on salmon industry M&A, and actually we went a little bit off piste yesterday, and we started that we had a pretty healthy debate about how many RAS facilities will come online in the next few years. And I think at the same time in social media, there's another debate going on about exactly the same topic, and that somebody from Moe has weighed in and said there's no way that you'll get that many plants by such and such a time. And as you just said, it's you have setbacks in your RAS facility, and you're kind of figuring out how to adjust the model, and so you're at the heart of this kind of how difficult it is to make all these small adjustments to get into your kind of steady state production. So what's your take on that debate that's going on right now? If lots of people will succeed or fail in a short period of time with RAS salmon facilities?
Yeah, I think that we operate one of the larger farms in the world, right, at 1,200 metric tons, and our we're full with our biomass right now, and because we've been raising fish for 25 years, we know what the concerns are. I think whether or not all of these RAS facilities that are quote unquote on the drawing board come to fruition is a big question mark. There's certainly enough demand to take up that supply. And I think we can drive demand in the seafood industry, particularly in the US where we eat half of what Europeans do. So there's a lot of opportunity to build consumption, to build demand. I think the challenge is going to be, that the technology providers like Innovasi, they don't operate facilities, right, necessarily. They may have a test facility, but they don't really operate it. And so they don't have the hands-on knowledge. And so, or you've got somebody that has done RAS, but, more in the early stages, and then, used it to grow through smoltification and put it in the ocean. But so right. the reality is managing a large biomass of, mature salmon, is going to be a challenge for many people. And we think that that's where our expertise is really going to pay off. And it's helping us to make sure that we're designing that facility efficiently, effectively, so that those fish thrive and they're healthy. And I would say the other, aspect of our business is we're regulated by the FDA because of our approval process. And what that has really forced us to do is we've got standard operating procedures that had to be approved by the FDA. And so at every stage of our production process, we have rigorous operating procedures, work instructions, the way we train our teams. And so we're not starting from scratch. when we build the large scale facility, we'll be implementing all of our lean and continuous improvement practice, all of our standard operating procedures, and that's not to be underestimated. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be, is those that are going to have to go through those growing pains. And not all of those facilities, number one, are going to be built, or number two, are going to be successful.
Right. That's interesting. I've got you. I said we'd be 30 minutes. I'm dragging you over that time. I'd love to get one more question, because I've probably got 5. But I can't ask them all, but I'll definitely go with one. We've seen a couple of the RAS projects in America come aground with some thorny permitting issues. Mm-hmm. I did notice, I think in one of your investor presentations, that you were looking to start construction in the first half of 2021. Do you think you can realistically go through the permitting process in such a short period of time for the US?
Yeah, I think that, remember where we're locating our farm, and it's in the Midwest. And so one of the benefits of being in the breadbasket, or the agricultural heartland, is that they get it. And those states are very receptive to new forms of agriculture. And, right. When you think about incorporating renewable energy and really providing a way, utilizable waste streams, we're not near the oceans, right? We're not, some of the coastal states are concerned. And I think that's why the permitting process has been a bit thorny. We don't expect to have that. That's part of our due diligence, is having those conversations early. And then, the fact that we're only discharging 5 to 3% of our water, and it's going through a state-of-the-art waste treatment plant, and we can show that with our Indiana facility. We can demonstrate that we know how to manage water because we operate a big farm. And I think that's going to help. And locating in an agriculturally oriented state.
Yeah. And just to follow on to that, I'm just going to bring a couple of different thoughts together. But Atlantic Sapphire talked about its operating costs, and it's very much based on the quality of the water resource that they have. And obviously, they're using saline water as well, which is a different process. I think that you guys have said, or perhaps you even said in your other presentation, that you need about 3,000 to 4,000 tons of annual production as kind of your sweet spot to break even. Does that put you at your operating cost similar to Atlantic Sapphire? I wouldn't expect you to give me a number, but just sort of a sense of where that's at.
We actually think between 10 and 20,000 metric tons is the sweet spot in terms of economies of scale.
Right.
Because larger than that, you're really not getting an advantage. And our philosophy is better to have redundant facilities and place them in other locations in the country that's closer to the population, so that you're minimizing the trucking aspect of things and the freshness. You're maximizing freshness. But from an operating perspective, that quite frankly is the benefit of our genetically engineered salmon, is that they grow faster and they eat less. Yeah. And so our throughput is going to be higher, and our operating costs will be less. And so that's why we believe that we can provide an affordable salmon to a broad part of the population. Right.
That's fantastic. And Sylvia, I've used up enough of your time, and it's been a great conversation. Yeah, it was great. And thanks very much. And look out for more of these interviews on Undercurrent News. We'll be making more soon.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again, Matt.